Namo Ramana. It has been my privilege to address this learned gathering for quite a few times now. So I have taken the privilege of going to right to the topic at hand, that is Bhagavan Ramana and the Bhagavadgita. My attempt would be to focus attention on self-enquiry in Bhagavad Gita. How self-attention has been taught by the Gita Acharya. Once a learned youngster, it is given in the talk that the youngster was very much aware of his learning. He comes to Bhagavan and has a discussion which Munagal Venkatramaya ji has required about 3-4 pages to record. And towards the end of the discussion, the young learned man asks Bhagavan, he is very learned in Bhagavad Gita also. He asks, now that my Gita Acharya is no more, I want a living Guru. Now that my Gita Acharya is no more, I want a living Guru. And Bhagavan says, if you think that Sri Krishna is no more, then the living Guru you seek will also be no more in no time. Has Sri Krishna not said that he is the Atma? Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Shayastitaha Aham Adischa Madhyamcha Bhutanam Antya Evacha. So Sri Krishna is the ever-living, eternal self of all. Once one of the devotees asks Bhagavan to give him one verse which he likes from Bhagavad Gita. It is not G.V. Subramaya, I suppose. Must be some other devotee. G.V. Subramaya is the one responsible for this work. That is the Gita Sara that we are going to take up. This devotee asks Bhagavan, which is the one verse you like the most in the Bhagavad Gita out of the 700? And Bhagavan says, each one of them. I like each one of them. And each one of them is worthy of being meditated upon, says Bhagavan. Then the devotee pleads, it is my inability that I am asking, my inability to meditate on this huge work, that I am asking you one verse. And Bhagavan yields and gives him chapter 10 verse 20, which is what I had chanted. Ahamatma Gudakesa Sarvabhuta Shayastitaha. I am the self. I am verily their beginning, their middle, and their end too. But then G.V. Subramaya, in the 1940s, he approaches Bhagavan and he doesn't ask for one verse, I suppose. He asks for a selection from the 700 verses, as he is unable to chant every day all the 700 verses. And he is a very learned person, a professor of English, I suppose, and very learned in Sanskrit and Telugu too. And he asks Bhagavan And Bhagavan, as usual, says each verse is worthy of meditation. Again, the same plea is kept that it is not a remark on the work of Sri Krishna, but it is the sadhaka's inability, that the sadhaka is asking for a few verses of importance so that his mind will be under the sway of the self, and Bhagavan yields and gives these 42 verses not as a selection. The Gita Sara is not a selection of verses, not a garland of verses, not a bouquet, but Bhagavan himself says it is a Gita Sara. And I had begun by saying that knowing the group that I am addressing, I would like to jump right to the verses on self-enquiry before having a brief look at the whole work. The intention being that how self-enquiry has been highlighted by the great one, Sri Krishna, and the subsidiary interest is to generate interest in this work, the Gita Sara, so that every one of the listeners benefits from this work. On a personal note, a few years back in our group, where we are a few hundred, I suppose 100 members or so, there was a task of meditating on the verses of Gita Sara. 2 weeks before the work was to be started, a person whom I know even now and whom I was knowing previously, who has not given me any books till then or thereafter, just 2 weeks before the Gita Sara was to be taken up, she suddenly felt like presenting the Acharyas, Shankaracharya's commentary to me. This fellow doesn't know anything. Let him have this. Someone up there had decided, and that came. And just 2 or 3 days before the work was to commence, Venkatesh Deshpande ji, one of the governing body members of our RMCL team, he gave me 2 talks by Chidanand Maharaj, Swami Chidanand ji of Shivananda Ashram. He was then the president. He had given 2 talks, and those 2 works they came automatically. That is the grace of the Atma. The grace of the self is that it takes care of us completely. It is not that the ego can do anything about learning Gita or Gita Sara. It is only by grace of the Atma Shakti that anything can be done in this area. And it is submitting myself to that power, which Bhagavan Ramana says when he is writing a Mangala Shloka for Atma Bodha. He is saying the same Atma is what wrote Atma Bodha in Sanskrit in those days through the Acharya. And it is the same Atma which is writing the same work in Tamil today. That is, the same Atma Shakti is present and is blessing us in going through this work and making the best shot at learning what it indicates. Let us go to the heart of the work. Verse number 27 and verse number 28, they indicate Atma Vichara, the practice which just lifted me from where I was, down in the mud, face and yet all completely merged in the mud. And Bhagavan came as Atma Vichara and simply lifted me by collar and made me stand up rather. And that is my reverence for Atma Vichara, because without that, I am nothing. That is the understanding that I have. The verse number 27 is taken from chapter 6, verse 25. It is Shanair Shanair Uparamet Buddhya Dhriti Grihitayat Atma Samstam Manakritva Na Kinchidapi Chintayet. Shanair Shanair Uparamet Buddhya Dhriti Grihitayat Atma Samstam Manakritva Na Kinchidapi Chintayet. This is the Gita Charya in chapter 6, verse 25. There is a translation by Major Chadwick into English. Bhagavan himself has transliterated and translated the Gita Sara into Tamil and Malayalam. This translation of Major Chadwick is very interesting. He has tried to write in verse form and given to Bhagavan for correction. Bhagavan's correction in his own handwriting of the English is simply superb, and he doesn't utter a single word of English in conversation. He waits for translator. But from this correction of Major Chadwick, who is an Englishman, his work, it is so revealing that the changes, both poetic and meaning, that Bhagavan gives are of excellent order. That's what we see. The corrections can be seen here in his own handwriting. The English translation by Chadwick is little by little, let him peace obtain. By understanding, steadiness attained. Chadwick has written, reason means by steadiness controlled. And Bhagavan has changed into Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya, is Bhagavan has changed it to understanding, steadiness attained, having made mind within the self abide, let him not think anything at all. So with the, how is the peace experienced? The peace is experienced as per the Taittiriya Upanishad. The peace is experienced in the intellect. How is the intellect the place where the peace of the self is experienced? Because we cannot cross the causal body. We cannot cross the causal body directly. The other two bodies being the Stula Sharira and Sukshma Sharira, the gross and the subtle bodies. One has to detach oneself from the gross and subtle and wait at the doorsteps of, or at the edge of, the intellect to burn the causal Sharira, the causal body, which rises up as thoughts. And when those thoughts are burnt one by one and the causal body is eliminated, in that intellect, the self shines. So it is with the intellect that one has to get steadiness. How is the steadiness got? By fixing the mind in the self. How is the fixing of the mind in the self possible? Is the next verse. Yato nischarati manas chanchalam astiram. Yato nischarati manas chanchalam astiram. Tatastato niyam yaivat atman yeva vasham nayet. The English translation, whenever yato, the unsteady, wavering mind outward projects, withdraw it from that place and lead it under the sway of the self alone. Yato nischarati manas chanchalam astiram. In the previous verse, the mind was asked to be fixed in the self. What is the practice of fixing the mind in the self? Whenever the mind wants to follow an object, whenever the mind wants to follow a thought, withdraw it from that. Withdraw it from that object and fix that attention on the self, so that the mind is now fixed in the self. These are the two verses of practice of Atma Vichara in this work. Let us build the whole work a little bit so that and come back to these two verses to finish. The work begins with Arjuna's self-pity. See, there is a difference between the compassion of the man caught up in I and mind and the compassion of Sri Krishna. The man caught up in I and mind shows compassion in the wrong place, and his compassion results in grief. Whereas Sri Krishna's compassion is compassion towards all living beings suffering from Bhavaroga. That compassion brings unconditional love, the grace of God, into this field of strife. And that is how the Gita Sara begins. Tam tata kripayavishtam ashrupurna kulekshanam vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha madhusudana. The first chapter of Gita is on the sorrow, the yoga through sorrow, or coming to Bhagavan through sorrow. Paramahamsa Yogananda ji, in the talks, it is recorded, he asks Bhagavan, why is such a compassionate God making us go through all this sorrow before joining him? Why can't he see that we have a bed of roses and directly join? Bhagavan says, what to do? That is the scheme of things. That is how it is laid out. That unless you see the limitation of this area, the samsara, you are not going to drop it and seek the true happiness of the self. And what happens to us whenever we suffer? When someone in the family is deeply not all right, or when you are facing a crisis of life, at least in India, amongst Indians, we immediately reach out to God. That is, in our culture, it is there that we immediately reach out to God. And we worship God in many different ways. What is reaching out to God according to Bhagavan? Who is God according to Bhagavan? Let us dwell a little bit on that, so that the weight of Atma Vicharam, the need for Atma Vicharam, is felt. We begin like Arjuna only. There is a family trouble. There is a trouble in sadhana. There is a trouble in the community to which we are deeply committed. Vanchinathan, it is said, he is in hideout in Vellore. Not Vellore, must be Pondicherry. It is the time when India is still not independent, and he is in hiding, and his father comes from his village to meet him in that hideout and says, your son has passed away. You have to come home. He is crying miserably. You have to come home and do his final rites. With a bland face, Vanchinathan says, my country is in trouble. Deep solutions are coming up in the meetings that are going to happen in the next few days. You please go and conduct that, right? Take this money and go. I want to stay here to attend the meeting. And goes on that account that his sorrow is for his whole country. But then it is the same, that at that time, we reach out to God, and Bhagavan gives us how to exactly reach out. He takes us by hand and leaves it in the hands of God. What is it that he does? Bhagavan Ramana says, God has to be ever existent in all places. That is all. God has to be Ulla Porul. He has to be that which is ever existent in all places. Now, he clarifies. The world and the body are present in waking and dream, but the world and body are absent in deep sleep. The world and body are present in waking and dream, but world and body are absent in deep sleep. So, with these two, the world and body, the presence of the seer and the seen, one cannot come to Ullapurul. That is another way to look at it. So far as there is the division between the seer and the seen, one is not experiencing God. So far as there is division between seer and seen, which we have now. I am here, but not there. Suppose I consider you are God, you are there, but clearly you are not here, is my experience as a seer. So in that experience, you cannot experience God, Bhagavan says. Because what is our aim? To get rid of our trouble? The only way we Indians know, at least the majority of us, is to hand over the problem to God. First we should meet God, isn't it? And Bhagavan says God must be Ullapurul. So what is it that the seer seen is absent in deep sleep? What is it that can be done as sadhana? This information is useless. We can't do anything with that information, that in waking and dream, we can't be with the Ullapurul. And in deep sleep, though everything has become one, we are not conscious. But what to do with this information? Bhagavan comes in to our rescue, says that it is mind that is present in waking and dream, and that mind is absent in that oneness of deep sleep. So if one can eliminate the mind and be with oneself or hold oneself, then there is oneness of the self. In that the seer seen is seen as an illusion. The waking, dream and deep sleep are crossed in that self-attention. And it is that has been mentioned in those two verses, that when the mind wants to take the seer seen to be true, let it be drawn inward and let it be fixed in the self. But how is Bhagavan taking the verses from the Gita to lead us to that? He takes the verses from chapter 13, the chapter in which the Kshetram and Kshetrajna Jnana are discussed. The seer and seen, which we saw, the knowledge of the seer and the seen is what is taken up in chapter 13. The two verses are taken from chapter 13. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetram ityabhidhiyate etadyo veti tam prahuhu kshetrajna iti tadvitah kshetrajnam chapi mam vitti sarvakshetresu bharata kshetrakshetrajnayor jnanam yatta jnanam matam mama ahamatma gudakesha sarvabhutashayastitah ahamadischa madhyam cha bhutanam anta evacha. These three verses, it gives us the knowledge of the seer and the seen, the experiencer and the experienced. The body is the kshetram. The body can be the Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira or Karana Sharira. And the one who is knower of that field is Kshetrajna. And Sri Krishna says that he is the Kshetrajna in all the fields. He is the one Kshetrajna in all the fields. That is, in Ulladu Narpadu, we are told after the rising of the first person, only the second and third persons are arising. In the Western philosophy, if you go to Spinoza, he points out that there is a universal ego. There is a universal ego underlying the whole creation. So in the knowledge of the self, where do we go? We may begin with our individual problems. Our enquiry may begin with, my daughter is in trouble, or my mother is in trouble. But then Bhagavan has said, to be free of the trouble, I have to go and meet Ullapurul. I have to be with God. There is nothing better I can do. Once I do this, I don't have a feeling I have not done enough. Anything else I do, I may end up with the feeling something more I could have done. Something more I could have done to better the situation in my organization. Something more I could have done to better the situation in my family. Something more I could have done to better the situation in my country, as Vanchinathan felt. But once you do Atma Vicharam and are with the Ullapurul, no such doubt arises. One is given the absolute certainty by that Ananya Bhakti that one has done everything that one can for the trouble with which the sadhana was started. For that, what is the knowledge that is required? One has to know what is Kshetram and who is Kshetrajna. The body is the Kshetram in which if you sow good deeds, you will get good results by Ishvara Kripa. If you sow bad deeds, you are going to get bad results by Ishwarajna. Then that Sri Krishna says that he is the one knower in all the fields. How do you reach him there? Whenever thoughts of another comes, what does Ulladu Narpadu say? Only after the first person arises, second and third person arises. Somebody had called in an old student of mine, saying that this friend of his is creating a lot of trouble. In a simple friendship, which requires trust and keeping up of the word, lot of difficulties. And we took up this verse for meditation. What does it mean to tackle that trouble? To tackle that trouble, should I analyze how to better that relationship? Bhagavan says, no, you will still be in doubt whether you could have done better. Whenever the thought of the other friend comes, do not go with that thought and analyze whether he was right or whether you were right. But whenever the thought of that friend comes, ask for whom is this thought. The thought is for me. Who am I, if you ask? You, along with your friend, your names may be different, but the I being the same, you take your friend and yourself to that one source where there is no doubt that you could have done anything better than that. That is the solution that Bhagavan gives with Atma Vicharam. Of course, as usual, I am running ahead of the verses, but that is my eagerness to share Atma Vicharam, so you'll have to bear with me. The verses here start with the Kshetram, Kshetrajnam, and the jnana of this, that who is that one Kshetrajna within all of us? He must be the Ishvara. He must be the Atma Shakti, is it not? And that is where Sri Krishna comes and says, Ahamatma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Shayastitah. I am that self-knowing thought. What is the nature of normal thought? The nature of normal thought is to know another, is to be interested in another, is to be dependent on another. But the self-attentive thought is only having I. It is the Akanda Atma which has now withdrawn all manifestation into itself. Manifestation requires the thought attending to another. But What is the Atma Shakti? It is Atma attending to itself. Though it is still energy, it is a totally different kind of energy which has withdrawn the whole manifestation into it. Now, what better solution can there be for someone in trouble like Arjuna, except to withdraw all manifestations into one's own self? Ahamatma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Shayastitah. Now, what is the nature of the body and what is the nature of the Atma? In the first 12 verses, this is what is covered. Only one verse is given to Anatma, the body. Jatasya dhruvor mrityur dhruvor janmam mritasya cha tasmad apariharyate natvam shochitu marhasi. Arjuna is said that which is born, which is the body, Jatasya hi dhruvor mrityu, has to face death. And somewhat intriguingly, whatever faces death is to be reborn, says Sri Krishna. Jatasya dhruvor mrityur dhruvor janmam mritasya cha. You have to get rebirth if you are facing death. Now, what is death then? Death is letting go or being freed of one of the koshas without letting go of the attachment to it. Let us put it like that. That is dropping the kosha without dropping the attachment to it. That means you have to get back a similar kosha till you free the consciousness from attachment to that. So therefore you will be reborn. Jatasya hi dhruvor mrityur dhruvor janmam mritasya cha. Apariharyate. There is no parihara for this. Why you should worry about this? So therefore the nature of the field is indicated. The nature of the field is janma, marana, janma, marana. And the next verses, that is verse number 6 to 12, are all about the Atma Swarupa. I will just read the English words referring to the Atma Swarupa so that we cross over to the next segment. He is not born nor dies, nor having been, ceaseth he evermore to be, unborn, abiding, everlasting, ancient too. He is not slain, the body having been killed, uncleavable and incombustible, and neither to be wetted nor to be dried, perpetual or pervasive, stable too, immovable, for everlasting is he. For know that he is indestructible, whom all this doth pervade. There is no one who can destroy the imperishable one. The unreal hath no being. The real doth never cease to be. The truth of both by seers of reality has been seen. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. That has an underlying look at Atma, Anatma. That is what Gaudapadar also inquires into. So let us briefly look at that verse. The unreal has no reality and the real has never become unreal. So the popular reference is to that of rope and snake. Let's quickly drop that analogy to come to look at what is actually there. That the world and the seer, the Namarupa and the Jiva, are both like the snake appearance because they are changing. And whatever is changing cannot be the Ullapurul, cannot be the ever-present one. Any change indicates presence once and absence at another time. Therefore, the Namarupa Jagat and the individual are like the snake appearance. And the Atma Swarupa, Ahamatma Gudakesha, is the screen and the light which are revealing this picture. The screen on which, that is why it is called as Sat Chit. The screen and the light are called Sat Chit. They are unchanging. The screen allows the Namarupa to have its existence and the light reveals them. But then, even when the appearance of the Namarupa is there, has Sat become non-existent? No. So, even when it appears, it is unreal only. So, even when the world and the Jiva appear, they are unreal. Only Sri Krishna is the reality. Only the Atma Swarupa is the reality. That is what is said here. And Gaudapada interprets it, that which was not before at some time, and that which will not be after some time, does not exist even when it appears now. Even when it appears before us, it does not truly exist. If it had no existence at some time before and is not going to exist sometime later. That is, nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo, na abhavo vidyate sat. Sat has no non-existence. And the asat has no existence, no real existence. So the trouble with which we started trying to see how can I go and hold God. The trouble is made non-existent in this abidance in the reality. Then as omnipresent either is not touched by reason of its subtlety, so too the self is not touched as it dwells within the body, seated everywhere. Now, though these three verses, 10, 11 and 12, are also about the self, there is going to be a shift of import. Let us pay some attention to that. Though all those verses are on the self, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the 10, 11, 12, Bhagavan shifts gears, so to say. Up to that, Bhagavan was referring to that as him. Now, Bhagavan is going to refer to that as a state, as an adhara, as an existence, as a paradhamasthiti in these three verses. And Bhagavan has selected these verses from across the Gita. But see the contiguity, the continuation of the meaning. Up to that, the verses were calling the Atma as him, as though it is within us. But then here, the lipyate, that is, the attachment is going to be taken, and Bhagavan is going to take us to another state here. Yata sarvagatam saukshmyat akasham nopalipyate sarvatravastito dehe tatatma nopalipyate. Just as though it is present in all the changing circumstances, the akasha is not affected by these changes, though in all the changes of the body, sarvatravastito dehe, the deha is undergoing childbirth, young age, middle age, old age, all that, and the various identities that are there in the Sukma Sharira. I am a good father, not so good father, good member of the community. Sometimes I throw waste wherever I want, not so good member of the society. But does the Atma undergo any change? No. Sarvatravastito dehe, it is present in the Sukshma, Stula and Karana. But all those changes does not touch the Atma Swarupa. Sarvatravastito dehe, tatatma nopalipyate. It is unaffected. Therefore, it is like the sky. It is the background. And from there, we are going to be taken to the Parandamasthiti. There, the sun lightens not, nor moon nor fire. Having gone thither, they return no more. This is of me the one supreme abode. One supreme abode. Natat bhasayate suryo, nashashanko napavakaha, yadgatva nanivartante, tadhama paramam mama. So from something that is imperishable existing within us, the immanent God, the immanent Ullaporul, that itself, because of its limitless nature, it is the transcendental Ullaporul. The same immanent Ullaporul which you find by dropping your limitations is the same transcendental Ullaporul. You are now holding God, and where is the problem with which you have started? It has been annihilated. And so is the 12th one, is about the Parandamasthiti. From 13, verse number 13 to the verse number 26 is said to be about the adhikari, about what the sadhaka is to be, what the sadhaka is to have as qualifications with which he can practice Atma Vichara. It is all about that, taken once again from various segments of the Gita. The verse 13 is like this. Nirmana moha jitasanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanjair gacchanta muda padamavyayam tat. What is the individual who wants to reach Ullapurul, who wants to really solve the problem which he has started with? And being one with God is the definite way to solve. You are starting with the problem that your institution is facing some requirement and you are in the meeting. What is the best way to bring that energy to the meeting, which leaves you in no doubt that you have done everything you can? What is that you can do to have that feeling as a member of that meeting, that to this problem, which is really critical for my organization, for my country, what is it that I can do to do everything that I can to resolve this problem? Is only to take the ego and fix it in the self. For that, the preparation is nirmana moha jita sangha dosha. Nirmana moha. Without the delusion and the pride. There in 2 words, Sri Krishna covers the whole area. Without the I and the delusion of mind, and without attachment. Now, detachment or disinterest is supposed to be the same as unconditional love. One may be surprised to hear that all these days I was thinking that thinking all the time about my daughter is real love for her. No. To free the consciousness of attachment to her is unconditional love. It makes me see that she too wants to be a light unto herself. She too wants to see God as He is, as God is. She is not something different from other living beings. My very attachment to her and wanting her to go from point A to point B is delusory. And to drop that delusion, one has to detach oneself. And that detachment is unconditional love. I am not going to condition her and say, you have to take the next step like this. Let her take whatever step she wants and learn. But then, what is she to learn? Is it to be a postdoctoral fellow? Maybe. But then, the main aim for her too, just like me, just like every other living being, is only to be one with that Paramatma. That becomes clear only when we are with detachment. Then comes the 14th verse which Bhagavan has selected, which gives us a major caution. It says that anyone who disregards scriptures and rules, he will not be able to attain even the normal goals. Forget about the peace or the Parama, the enlightenment. Forget about all that. This is a verse Bhagavan has selected and put here for us to understand the Jnana Marga does not mean that you are a rule unto yourself, that your intellect can feel that it is the only power on earth, that it does not have to listen to anybody. You have to learn to stop at the signal. You have to learn why the great ones have fixed speaking truth, holding ethics, bhakti to that one power. That verse is like this. Yah Shastra Vidhi Mutsrajya Vartate Kamakaratah Nasa Siddhim Avapnoti Na Sukam Na Param Gati. To such a one who does not understand that only by restricting oneself, only by restricting oneself from outgoing, only from looking at impulses and not living an impulsive life, not be carried away by vasanas, not go wherever the mind wants you to go, not foolishly decide that just fulfillment of whatever desire comes, that is the best. No. Yashatra Vidhi Mrutsajya, the one who is sidestepping the Shastras and rules, he will not even get success in this world, not happiness, and definitely not the Param Gatim, says Bhagavan, and he has included this to caution the intellect, which is going to free from here on. He is going to free the intellect. I am not going to go into the individual verses from here on. But the beauty of the next few verses before the sadhana, I will cover. I will try to look at so that some interest is there. Bhagavan looks at the sadhana from bhakti and from jnana from the Gita. In the next few verses, next 4 or 5 verses, he is going to put complete attention on bhakti, saying that the Atma Labha is going to come only by the Eka Bhakti. The Eka Bhakti of the Paramatma, without that it is not going to come. Then he is focusing on 2 verses on Shraddha, the faith that we have, the sincerity that we have. That is the Shraddhavan labate jnana tatpara samyatendriyaha jnanam labva param shantim achirena adhikachati. Now, the whole sadhana depends on your faith, says the verse. That where you are going to get is going to depend on how much you love Bhagavan, how much you understand that life has given you. The more you understand how much grace has been there for you to be born as a human being, for you to be shown that the way out of trouble is bhakti to God. No, how you were exposed to that? How is Jiva privy to that? It is not in Jiva's nature to know about God. It is only by grace of God. Avan arulale amantal panindu. Only by grace of God can we worship Him. How else can we, the same as gorillas, monkeys, with nothing better than them except the linguistic ability, how could we know that there is the Param Gatim? It is only by the grace of the Param Gatim. The more we realize that surrender, the more we have faith, the easier is going to be the labha of jnana. And that is what he says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam. Dadami buddhi yogam. To those who have such kind of faith, the limitless faith in them, I give buddhi yoga. Many are the devotees in Bhagavan who have crossed the intellect by I should not use the words, just by surrender. Lakshmi the cow, Ramana the brahmachari, Mudalayar party, all great jnanis, Purna jnanis. Bhagavan gives the stamp of self-realization to Lakshmi the cow. And the path is surrender. And when we surrender, all the complexities of intellect are crossed like that. You can see Mudalayar party crossing the complexities of intellect. The manager, he says to her at one point, why do you come to the ashram, O party? You cannot see Bhagavan anyway. Why do you take the trouble of coming to ashram? And Mudalayar party responds to him, he is the head of the ashram. So what fear would be there if she were a normal person? She is not a normal person. Through the bhakti, she has been given the buddhi yoga. And from that buddhi yoga, she says, oh sir, is it for us to see God that we are coming here? Is it not for God's drishti to fall on us? Is it not for Bhagavan to see us with grace that we are coming? And Bhagavan smilingly looks at the manager and says, how are you going to reply? That is buddhi yoga dadhami. The Ishvara gives buddhi yoga to the bhakta. But the next few verses, the clarification is that the same yoga can be attained by sadhana. And the verses delineate the jnana marga. Jnanam basmasat kurute karma. There, the understanding is that the one who is going for jnanam, will definitely understand the greatness of bhakti. Without understanding the greatness of bhakti, jnanam will not be given. And one of the verses towards the end, just before the sadhana verses, is that when you get jnanam through jnana marga, you will realize that it is through destiny that Ishvara has given that. And then the two verses on sadhana are there, 27 and 28. That is, Shaner Shaner Uparame Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya Atma Samstam Manakritva Na Kinchitapi Chintayet Yato Yato Nischarati Manaschanchalam Astiram Tatas. So that is 29 to 40 are on the nature of the jnani, which we have seen even in the Ullad Narpade. So I am not going to go into them. What is the nature of the Samadrishti? Then whatever he works, he doesn't get any benefit. Suppose he has omitted some work, nothing is lost. All those are covered in those verses. I would like to look at verse number 41 and 42, which turns the whole work on its head. The whole work of Atma Vichara is turned on its head back to Bhakti. And Bhagavan says, the one who is doing Atma Vichara is the totally surrendered one, totally surrendered to the self. That is what is shown in the last two verses. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridye sherjuna tishtati brahmayam sarva bhutani yantra rudani mayaya. Bhagavan's upadesham to mother that our prarabdha prakaram adarkanavan angangi irunde aativupan. The ordainer remaining in the heart of each individual raises the thoughts by which their prarabdha is to be fulfilled. Therefore, that which is bound to happen will happen. Try however you may to stop it. That which will not happen will not happen. Try however you may to make it happen. This is absolutely certain. The best course, therefore, is to remain still. Is for the ego not to worry about the happenings. Transcend them by yato yato nischarati manaschanchalam astirat tatastato niyamyaiva atmanyeva vashamnayet. When you go towards the Atma, first you will find Ishvara Shakti. The Ishvara Shakti absorbs all manifestations. And Bhagavan says, when the Ishvara Shakti is now visible to you as this Purana, as the I, which has consumed all the manifestations, including the Kurukshetra war. The Kurukshetra war has now been consumed by the I. You are abiding with that I, and Bhagavan says, don't ask anything from that I. When you don't ask anything from that, which is self-attentive power, which has consumed the whole manifestation, then that self-attentive power, this Purana, it will become quiet, says Bhagavan. Like light lit on camphor, this Purana will become quiet, and there the effortless self-abidance is your real nature, is what is experienced. And the last verse, that is, Tameva Sharanam Gacha, to that self, which is effortless and a light unto itself. Tameva Sharanam Gacha, Sarva Bhavena Bharata, not just offer one part of your life, not just offer one side. This trouble alone, you please take care. The rest of the things I am taking care. This particular thing, that alone I am not able to manage. So you do something about that. The rest of the things I am having enough intelligence. When we say like that, that is not surrender. Sarva Bhavena Bharata. All thoughts, including the I thought, have to be offered in Sarva. Tameva Sharanam Gacha. Sarva Bhavena Bharata. Tat Prasadat Param Shantim. Sthanam Prapsyasi Shashvatam. That Shashvata Sthana, the Parandhama, from which there is no need to return. There is no other place to go. There is no other time to be in. Here and now has consumed everything. This Purana has consumed all manifestation, and you are holding it and keeping quiet. This Purana too quietens down. Then there is only effortless self-abidance. Where is the problem with which you started? Where is Kurukshetra war? Where is the wife who is in trouble, the daughter who is in trouble, the mother who is in trouble? They are all the self. There is nothing else but to share this love, this unconditional light, this Swayam Prakasha Atma. In fact, to tell that that is the energy you bring to this world, that statement too is consumed in that self. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.